This is Brian, driving while ADHD. So this is part two of a first video that I did a while back called ADHD and Imposter Syndrome. So imposter syndrome is basically the prevailing and nagging belief that you are a fake, you're an imposter. It usually is associated with having a role, for example, being a father, being a good brother, sister, a parent, or could be a professional role, being a banker, being a teacher, being a carpenter, anything. And so you have this role, right? But you have evidence all around you that you are doing an effective job within that role, but yet you somehow feel like you are an imposter, that you're faking it all the time. So I just want to start off with like just one real basic, which is we are faking things often. So let's take the example of being a parent. So you're a parent, as they say, there's no like manual on how to do it. Well, that's actually not true. There's plenty of books, right, on parenting. But ultimately, you're confronted with things that you just never would have imagined, and you have to figure it out. So a lot of it is winging it, right? So that's just like it's kind of the nature of having any kind of a role. Let's say you are a teacher, and I am a teacher. I've been a school administrator too, and that was my real issue with imposter syndrome. But as a teacher, you are humming along and you kind of got a routine. Let's say you're teaching, I don't know, fourth grade, I'll just say. It's a grade that I know. Things are going pretty well. You kind of have a day-to-day routine with your students, and then a new student shows up with a lot of problems, and they just throw your world upside down. They cause all kinds of havoc. You don't know how to deal with them very effectively. You're having trouble reaching out for help. You start doubting yourself, and you're like, am I just a fake here? Am I, imposter? So within roles, there's going to be a certain amount of confrontation that leads to doubt, and there's also going to be a certain amount of just having to wing it. But the problem with imposter syndrome and the sort of prevailing effect it has on you is that it's constant. So it's like an intrusive thought, right? It's just constantly bothering you, and you find yourself comparing yourself to others, and you find yourself doubting yourself, despite the evidence to the contrary. And I think that's the key piece here. Now, let's also look at the reality that you might be in the wrong job. I mentioned I was a school principal. When I look back on my life and my career in education has been very rich, very rewarding. I've always worked for challenging schools, and I just happened to take on one of the most challenging schools as a school principal. And honestly, in retrospect, I don't think I was a good match for the community per se and for that job. So that's an example of, really it might not be imposter syndrome. It might be actually the feedback around you is telling you like, hey, you might not be the best match for this particular position or this environment or whatever. So you do have to be open to that too. And the way to get that feedback is by getting some people who are genuinely close to you, I think, to give you some real honest feedback about that. But that aside, if you're suffering from imposter syndrome, basically what that means is you are getting good feedback from the environment around you. People are, they count on you for the different roles that you have in life. So why does this happen more so with people with ADHD? I would gather that people, when we have attention issues, whether it be ADHD, hyperactivity, or ADHD and attentive type, we are constantly getting cues from the environment that we're not doing that well, that we're not good enough. Now, especially when we haven't been diagnosed and treated in some way. I don't specifically mean medication. It could be therapeutic. But let's say you're in middle school and you have ADHD. You are leaving your book in your locker by accident. You are interrupting people. And the feedback you're getting is, hey, you interrupted me, and, you feel badly, right? The feedback you're getting about losing things is that your teachers are frustrated with you. So you're constantly getting bad feedback, whatever role you're in. that's gonna make you more susceptible to imposter syndrome. So I think that's sort of the big thing about having the attention issues, is that you have to be aware of that. And here's another part of that, is that some of those things, like forgetting things, interrupting, forgetting to write something down, having the wrong date, having the wrong time, those are issues in your life as a person with ADHD that are a separate, I would like you to think of them as a separate set of problems that you can conquer, that are independent of your judging yourself as a whole person when it comes to fulfilling a role. In other words, you can be a great teacher and you can still have problems forgetting things, and still have problems that are associated with ADHD, such as focusing attention, but you can still fulfill your duties as you work on those problems. You can be a great mom, and you might have some issues with not always having everything stocked for your child when you go for an outing, and you might start to feel hard on yourself. But that does not mean that you are not fulfilling the role of a loving, supportive mom to your child. And that's really what your child cares about, right? Is your love and your support, not whether you forgot her juice or something, at a picnic. Back to the teacher, your students learning from you and knowing that you care about them as individuals is what matters, not the fact that you might have mixed up your schedule because you had problems with attention. So if you can kind of keep those two things separate, it will help ease some of the feelings you might have with imposter syndrome. So that would be my biggest recommendation, is be aware of when you're feeling that and see how it's tied to some of the things that you do struggle with ADHD. I can tell you, let me go back to the example of being a principal of a school, which I was. So I remember showing up to meetings with other principals and kind of being like the last one to get my laptop open and to have my documentation ready, like on Excel and Microsoft Word and stuff. And I remember feeling like, wow, in that particular case, like, oh, I'm just not, I'm just so bad or whatever. I think that's a kind of an ADHD thing that I deal with in all aspects of life, and I want to say to keep that separate. Let's say that you're working for a corporation, maybe it's tech, and you're going to be responsible a lot for kind of keeping a really up-to-date calendar. Well, you might be wonderful at the aspects of your job, like say the technical aspects of, say, producing code or whatever. Or maybe you're in sales and you're really great with people. And remember, those are the core functions of your job. Now, you might have some problems with disorganization due to the ADHD. I want to again stress, like, treat that as a separate entity of things that you're always working on. And although, of course, it does affect your performance in whatever role you have, it does not determine and brand you as in that role as not being good enough. Look to the core functions of whatever you're doing. Like I mentioned before, if you're a parent, what is really important about being a parent? Keeping your child safe, having love for your child, having them learn things, right? What is really important for, let's see, I'll just make one up, a real estate agent. Probably getting a person excited about buying a home, being transparent about what the buying of the home could mean. Does it have any problems? Being transparent and communicative about the process of buying a home in the documentation. In that job, though, you might be a little forgetful. In that job, you are not going to be perfect. And when you have ADHD, some of those organizational things, they're going to bother you, right? But ultimately, when you have that relationship with your clients, right, and they buy that home from you, that's what's going to matter to them. And that's what should matter to you. I want to leave on a very hopeful note. There's in a wonderful Zen Buddhism book, it's my favorite. It's called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. There's this great parable, and I'll sum it up like this. The author, Shunryu Suzuki, he's the person who started the San Francisco Zen Center when he came from Japan, I think in the 50s or the 60s. So he writes this book, and he says there's three kinds of horses. There's the horse that doesn't even need a little touch of the whip, and the horse will gallop and will get moving and knows where to go. Then there's the medium horse, and that horse needs a little bit of the whip. He has to feel the whip a little bit to get motivated, to move, to turn, to gallop, to trot. And then there's what he calls the worst horse. And the worst horse is the one that needs to feel the whip bury into his flesh. I think he even says to the bone or something in the book, for the horse to move, to get motivated, to gallop, to trot, to turn. So then he takes it a step further and he says, let's say that you are a father. He uses the example of being a father of a child. You might think you're the worst horse. There's so many reasons why you might think that. Maybe your kid, your boy, your girl wants to be good at sports and you don't know how to teach them because you're not good at sports. Maybe you're forgetful about appointments, different things, right? And some of these things might be related to ADHD. You might think you're the worst horse, but Shunryu Suzuki says, sometimes when you think you're the worst horse, you're actually the best horse. And the reason that he says that is that if you are sometimes hard on yourself and you believe that you could be better, that might mean you're constantly reflecting and being better. So you might actually be the best one after all. And the person who might think that they're the best horse, who brags about things, who says, I'm the best at this or that, they might actually be the worst horse because they're not really improving, they're not really reflecting. And so that's the parable I wanted to leave on. And then I wanted to just say one more thing that I forgot earlier, is that so much of this issue of feeling like imposter also has to do with comparisons and comparing yourself to other people in whatever role. So you might be comparing yourself to the absolute best real estate agent, the best teacher, the best father, the best son that you know. And so within that constant comparison, of course you're going to always feel yourself coming short. So I'll just leave it at that. So it's okay sometimes if you feel like the worst horse, you might actually be the best one and not even realize it.